The wind tore through the canyons like a wounded animal, howling in dry, rattling scrub brush and stirring dust devils that danced like spirits on the red New Mexico soil. It was 1872, and the land bore the scars of a war long finished in ink but not in memory. Through the haze rode a man alone, slouched in the saddle like a tree grown crooked from wind. His coat was threadbare, his boots stained with years of travel, and the look in his eyes spoke of places he'd rather not remember. His name was Levi Cutter, and he'd come for a horse. The animal beneath him, a tired old gelding named Hank, limped with every other step. The trip from Amarillo had been punishing: storms, dry creeks, and a night spent fending off coyotes. Levi didn't curse the journey. He rarely spoke at all. But even he knew Hank couldn't go another mile past Dust Creek. Dust Creek was the kind of town that forgot its own name most days. A scatter of sun-bleached buildings, a church missing its steeple, and a general store that looked one gust away from collapse. Levi dismounted in front of the livery stable, rubbing Hank's neck with a quiet apology. Inside, the air was thick with hay and horse sweat. A bent-backed old vaquero emerged from the shadows, hat low over sharp eyes. Salvador. His name passed through the town like a whisper, half in legend, half in rumor. He didn't greet Levi, just looked him over like a man checking for rust on a blade. "You lookin' to buy or steal?" he asked without emotion. Levi didn't flinch. "Buy. Need something sure-footed. Trailwise." Salvador spit into the dust. "You're late. Sold the last one worth naming 2 days ago to a preacher headin' north." Levi's face didn't change, but something sank behind his eyes. "There ain't another?" Salvador stared at him a moment longer, then slowly pointed with a leathery hand toward the hills beyond the town. "Widow McAllister's got one. Her man broke him before the fever took him. Mustang, dun-colored, heart of fire. She keeps him like a memory, though. Don't think she'll sell." Levi turned without another word, gave Hank a pat, and walked out. Salvador watched him go and muttered, "You ain't just buying a horse, cowboy. You're walking into something else." The McAllister place lay 3 miles out, nestled at the base of hills dotted with pinyon and cedar. The land was stubborn, carved by wind and time, but someone had coaxed life from it. A lean house stood upright against the world, its porch held aloft by beams scarred with weather and nails that knew hardship. A woman worked at the fence, sleeves rolled to the elbows, hammer in hand. 4 children darted around her, 3 boys and a girl, moving between chores and a world only they understood. Levi pulled up just shy of the gate. The woman stood straight, wiping sweat from her brow, squinting into the sun. Her eyes were cautious, not afraid, but used to measuring the weight of a man before letting him speak. She picked up a rifle that leaned against the fence and rested it lightly in the crook of her arm. "Can I help you?" Her voice was plain, like worn cloth, strong in its simplicity. Levi tipped his hat. "I was told you might have a Mustang for sale." A pause. One of the boys stopped, mid-chase, staring at the stranger. The girl clutched a battered doll and backed toward the porch. "That horse ain't for sale," the woman said. "He belonged to my husband. Broke him himself. Buried him right under that cottonwood." Levi glanced to where a lone tree stretched toward the sky, branches sparse but defiant. "I'm sorry," he said, meaning it more than he expected. She studied him. "You a drifter?" He gave a short nod. "Name's Levi Cutter." She didn't offer hers. "My horse is gone lame. Just need a mount to get me to the next post. I'll trade work for a day. No trouble. Then I'll go." The rifle didn't move, but her jaw softened a shade. She looked at the children, then back at the man whose eyes didn't shift or plead. "You know anything about fencing?" she asked. "I've mended worse. You sleep in the barn. You eat what you earn. And you don't talk to my children unless they speak first." Levi nodded. "Fair enough." She turned and walked back to the fence. "Name's Clara McAllister. Don't make me regret this." That afternoon, Levi worked like he owed something to the land. His hands moved with the rhythm of a man who'd patched broken things before. He didn't talk, didn't linger. Just hammered, carried, and fixed. The children watched from a distance, whispering. The oldest boy, maybe 12, approached once, offering a jug of water. Levi nodded his thanks but said nothing. The boy didn't run, but he didn't stay either. When the sun dipped low, Clara handed him a plate of stew. No words passed between them. Levi ate with quiet focus while the family sat a few yards away on the porch, laughing at something the youngest said. It was a sound Levi hadn't heard in years, unforced, unworried laughter. He closed his eyes briefly and felt it thrum in his bones like a distant train. That night, the barn was warm and smelled of hay and old stories. Levi lay staring at the rafters, thoughts drifting like smoke. He remembered a brother's face, younger, smiling, then bloodied. The war had taken him, but Levi blamed himself. He'd urged him to enlist. Told him glory was a man's duty. Now glory was a hollow drum. In the dark, a soft nicker came from the far stall. Levi rose, careful not to wake the dog curled at his feet. He approached the Mustang. The dun-colored beast watched him, eyes wide and alert. There was intelligence there, and challenge. Levi reached a hand slowly. The horse didn't bolt, just stared, muscles coiled. "You and me," Levi whispered, "we both know what it means to survive." The next morning, Clara stood by the fence, arms crossed. "You work quiet," she said. "Noise don't fix fences," he replied. She looked him over, then motioned toward the corral. "You want a shot at him? He don't let many ride." Levi approached the Mustang slowly. The children gathered at the edge of the yard, silent. Levi didn't use a rope. Just presence. He spoke in murmurs, steady, soothing. The horse flicked an ear, snorted, and finally allowed the saddle. He mounted, rode once around the pen. The horse resisted, then yielded, not with submission, but with respect. When Levi dismounted, Clara looked impressed, though she didn't say so. "He likes you," she said. "Might be the first man since my husband he didn't try to throw." "Still not for sale?" Levi asked. She hesitated. "Not sure anymore." Before either could speak further, a sound cracked across the valley like a whip. Gunfire. 3 shots. Levi stiffened, turned toward the ridge. Clara's face changed. Her children ran to her. She grabbed the rifle. "Bandits?" Levi asked. She nodded. "They've come before. My husband borrowed money before he died. They think the land's theirs now." "How long?" Levi asked. "They said they'd be back in 2 days. That was a week ago." Levi looked to the hills, then back at the family behind him. "I'll stay," he said. Clara looked at him, uncertain. "Why?" He didn't answer. Instead, he turned toward the barn. Tomorrow, he'd build more than a fence. He'd build a wall. The sun rose with a fierceness that scorched the earth before noon, but Levi Cutter was already working when its first rays broke across the horizon. Sweat darkened the collar of his shirt as he set fence posts deep into the stubborn soil, each strike of the mallet echoing like a heartbeat through the quiet land. Clara watched from the porch with narrowed eyes, arms crossed, the rifle never far from reach. She had offered him a roof, not trust. That had to be earned. The children were quieter today, their play subdued, ears tuned to the wind. Even the youngest, a boy of 5 who hadn't yet lost the roundness of his cheeks, clung closer to his mother's skirts. Something unseen pressed against the edges of the air, tension, unspoken but heavy. Levi didn't ask questions. He had seen enough men die to know when trouble was real. The rhythm of the work steadied him, drove back memories that clawed at his mind in the stillness. Every board nailed down, every gate reinforced, it was a vow to the family he hadn't known he was fighting for. By midday, Clara stepped out with a canteen and a piece of bread wrapped in cloth. She handed them over without a word. Levi took them, nodding in thanks, but she didn't turn to go. "You ever raise children?" she asked abruptly, eyes fixed on the fence. Levi looked at her, surprised. "No. I figured." Her tone was matter-of-fact, not cruel. You don't flinch when they fight. Most men either scold or get flustered. You just let them be. Kids need to scrape their knees. That's how they learn balance. Clara's lips twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. My husband used to say that. Levi sipped the water slowly. He was right. He was kind. And brave. But not cruel enough to survive the debt collectors. Her voice was brittle now, like glass about to fracture. They want the land? They want revenge. The bank sold the note to some cattle syndicate. Now they send men with guns instead of paper. 3 came last time. Tore up the barn roof and took our mule. Why not leave? Levi asked quietly. She looked out over the land. The wind caught a loose strand of her hair, and she didn't bother to fix it. Because this place is all we have. My children were born here. My husband died digging that well. If we leave, it means everything he did turns to dust. Levi nodded once and handed back the empty canteen. Then we'll hold it. She didn't reply, but something shifted in her eyes. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the ghost of it. That evening, the wind picked up, carrying with it the dry crackle of distant thunder. A storm threatened, and with it, the dread that the real trouble wouldn't wait for rain. Levi moved faster, pulling loose tools into the shed, checking the hinges on the stable. Clara called the children inside, bolting the door behind them. When the first drops fell, fat and angry, Levi stood alone by the corral. The Mustang was restless, ears twitching, sensing something beyond the weather. Lightning streaked across the sky, briefly illuminating the ridgeline, and Levi froze. There, silhouetted against the flash, were 3 riders. He moved quickly to the porch. Clara met him at the door, rifle already in hand. They're early, she said. Too early. They want surprise. The children huddled behind her, wide-eyed but silent. The eldest, Caleb, held a small hatchet as if it were a saber. Levi knelt and looked the boy in the eye. You stay inside. Lock the back room. You keep your brother and sisters safe. You understand. Caleb hesitated, then nodded. He didn't ask questions. Levi respected that. Then Levi looked at Clara. They'll likely come from the east, where the trail dips behind the trees. I'll take the porch. You sure? I've shot rabbits on the run since I was 12. Bandits bleed the same. There was a silence then, not of fear, but of acknowledgement. 2 people who had walked through fire and come out scorched but not burned. The riders didn't come until after the rain stopped. They moved like wolves, silent, confident, teeth bared just out of sight. Levi crouched near the barn, rifle resting on a bale. Moonlight broke through the storm clouds, casting long shadows. Then came the creak of saddle leather and the crunch of boot. A voice called out, smug and slow. McAllister. You know what time it is. Pay up or get out. Levi answered for her. She ain't got anything you want. Ride on. The silence that followed was absolute. Then a chuckle. You got a hired gun now, widow? Thought you were too proud to beg. I didn't beg, Clara said sharply from the porch. He offered. Another pause. Then a sharper tone. We'll give you one last chance. Walk away, cowboy. This ain't your fight. Levi stepped into the open. Every man's gotta pick one. I picked this. They came fast. One from the left, another flanking the barn, the third charging the porch. Gunfire erupted, hot and violent. Levi dropped to one knee, fired once, clipped a rider's shoulder, sending him spinning from his saddle. Clara fired from the porch, calm as dusk, hitting her mark square in the chest. The bandit crumpled. The third man made it to the steps, until Caleb appeared in the doorway and swung the hatchet down with all his weight. It glanced off the man's arm, giving Clara just enough time to fire again. The attacker fell backward, tumbling into the dust. Then it was over. 3 bodies lay still, and the only sound was the whimpering of wind through broken branches. Levi stood, breath shallow, rifle lowered. Clara's face was pale, eyes wide, but steady. You all right? He asked. She nodded, looking down at the blood on her porch. It's not the first time. Won't be the last. Levi looked past her, to the children peering through the doorway. They shouldn't have to grow up like this, he murmured. Clara didn't argue. Instead, she stepped down, walked past the fallen men, and stood by Levi's side. You'll need to ride into town tomorrow. Tell the sheriff what happened. Won't matter, Levi said. They own him too. Then what will? Levi hesitated, then looked toward the barn, where the Mustang paced restlessly in his stall. Sometimes you can't wait for justice. You ride for it. Clara looked at him then, really looked, and saw not just the tired cowboy who came for a horse, but a man carrying years of guilt, now tempered into purpose. You planning to leave? She asked. I was. And now? Levi turned his eyes toward the children, then to the blood-soaked earth. Now I reckon I got more reason to stay than I thought. The clouds parted above them, and the stars came out like old friends returning. The morning after the gunfight broke with a hush across the land, as though even the wind respected the silence of a place that had narrowly escaped ruin. Smoke still curled up faintly from the scorched grass near the porch, and buzzards circled distantly, black silhouettes against a sky scrubbed clean by the storm. Levi sat on the edge of the porch, boots muddy, shirt torn, hands calloused and rough around a tin mug of coffee that had long gone cold. Clara stood behind him, arms wrapped around herself as though trying to hold in the grief she refused to show. Inside the house, the children slept in a tangled pile of blankets, the way only the innocent could, despite the violence that had nearly shattered their world. You said you were riding to town, Clara said softly, her voice brittle. Levi didn't look at her. I will. But not alone. She glanced toward the barn, where the Mustang stomped impatiently in his stall. You planning to take the horse? Levi nodded. He's wild, but he knows danger. We both do. She sat beside him, the boards creaking under her weight. And what happens when you tell the sheriff? When he pretends nothing happened? Then I give him proof. Levi reached down into the satchel at his feet and pulled out a blood-stained badge, taken off one of the men from the night before. Turns out one of them wasn't just muscle. He was a deputy moonlighting for the syndicate. That's the crack I need. Clara's eyes flickered with something close to hope, but she quickly suppressed it. And what if they come back while you're gone? Levi finally turned to her. I won't be gone long. And next time, you won't be alone. He reached into his coat, drawing out a slip of folded paper. A name. A place. Scrawled in fading ink. There's a man near Ridgewater. A scout. Half Cheyenne. Saved my life once in Arizona territory. Name's Jonah White Elk. If he's still breathing, he'll help. He don't like cattle barons, and he sure don't like bullies. Clara took the paper, her fingers grazing his for a moment too long. I've held this ranch with spit and willpower, Levi. But I'm tired of waiting for someone else to show up. He looked at her, admiring the strength in her voice. You didn't wait. You fought. And now you've got someone to fight with. He stood, the sun casting his long shadow across the earth as he stepped down and made for the barn. Clara followed, the paper still clutched in her hand. In the stable, the Mustang pawed the dirt, tossing its head as Levi approached. He reached out, palm steady, and the animal stilled. I never had a place, he said, almost to himself. Not really. Just followed the next horizon. Every time I thought I found something worth staying for, it slipped through my fingers. And now? Clara asked. Levi turned. Now I don't want to slip. He mounted the Mustang in one smooth motion, the saddle creaking beneath him. With a nod, he rode out toward town, his figure shrinking into the horizon. The town of Coldwater was quieter than usual when Levi arrived. Too quiet. Storefronts were shuttered, and the saloon's door swung lazily in the wind. The sheriff's office sat crookedly at the end of the street, the flag above it limp in the heat. Levi dismounted, tied the Mustang to the hitching post, and walked inside. Sheriff Dalton was leaning back in his chair, boots on the desk, chewing a sliver of jerky. He looked up without surprise. Cutter. Figured you'd come around. I came with news, Levi said flatly, tossing the bloodied badge onto the desk. That belonged to any of your boys? Dalton squinted, chewed slower. Where'd you get it? Off a corpse. One of 3 men who rode out to Clara McAllister's ranch last night to steal her land and kill her children. Dalton sat up straighter now, jerky forgotten. You realize what you're saying? I realize he had your star on his chest and blood on his hands. The sheriff rose, pushing back his chair. You don't bring this kind of accusation in here lightly. I didn't come for your permission, Levi said, voice low. I came to see what side you're on. Dalton stared at him, jaw tight. Finally, he sighed and reached for a ledger on the shelf behind him. Name. Didn't get one. But I'll recognize the others. Dalton opened the book and pointed. That badge went missing 3 months ago. Claimed by a drifter who signed on for temp patrol up in Miners Bluff. Never came back. Levi didn't answer. He already knew what it meant. The syndicate had sunk roots deep. Deeper than law. Maybe deeper than blood. Will you ride out and see the bodies yourself? Levi asked. Dalton hesitated. I'll send someone. No. You come. Or I start talking to every rancher between here and the pass. The sheriff weighed the threat, then nodded. All right. I'll come. 3 days later, Jonah White Elk arrived with a hunting bow slung over his back and 2 rawhide braids swinging from under his hat. He didn't speak much, but when he locked eyes with Clara, something silent passed between them, respect, perhaps. Or understanding. Levi rode back into the yard just before sundown, the sheriff behind him, looking older by the minute. They buried the bodies behind the stable. Not out of honor, but to make sure the children didn't have to look at them again. As the sun dipped low, the small family gathered around the fire Levi had built just beyond the fence. Jonah cleaned a rabbit while the children listened to his stories, spoken in short, clipped phrases. Caleb watched every movement like he was memorizing a map to manhood. Clara sat beside Levi, her hand grazing his under the blanket they shared. So what happens now? She asked. Levi stared into the flames, the orange glow flickering against his scarred face. Now the syndicate knows we won't bend. And they'll send more. You still want to leave? No, he said simply. I think I found the fight I was meant for. She smiled. Not wide, not easy, but real. And maybe the family you were meant for too. He glanced over at the children, who had started laughing at something Jonah had said in his dry, wry tone. They weren't afraid anymore. Not tonight. I've seen war. Watched men break for less than what you've held together with your bare hands, Levi said. But this is worth staying for. Jonah nodded once without looking up. Family is the last land no one can steal. Levi didn't respond, but he felt the words settle deep in his chest, somewhere behind the ribs. The place where dreams had once lived before they were burned out by gunpowder and loss. The wind shifted gently, brushing through the tall grass like a lullaby. The Mustang whinnied in the stable, and the stars blinked alive overhead. Levi wrapped an arm around Clara as the fire popped and cracked. This time, he wouldn't ride on. This time, he had something to protect. Something to belong to. And maybe, just maybe, that was all he'd ever needed. Levi awoke before the first light, his instincts sharpened by years of drifting and danger. The air held a strange stillness, the kind that whispered something was shifting, either in the land or in the hearts of men. He stepped out onto the porch, boots scuffing wood slick with dew. The ranch stretched out before him like a promise, fragile but real. Smoke curled from the chimney. The Mustang paced in the paddock, ears twitching. The world hadn't burned down. Not yet. Inside, Clara moved quietly through the kitchen, her silhouette calm but purposeful. She offered him coffee without words, her eyes meeting his with the unspoken bond forged through fire. He took it, their fingers brushing for only a second, but it grounded them both. Jonah White Elk stood at the edge of the barn, scanning the horizon. He moved like the land, slow, deliberate, certain. He had stayed longer than Levi expected, and each day his presence had worked like a stitch across old wounds in Clara's home. He didn't speak often, but when he did, his words lingered. "They will come soon," Jonah said, eyes never leaving the hills. "Men who do not forgive being made to bleed." Levi nodded. "Let them. We're not the same people they tried to scare off." Clara appeared at the barn door, Caleb beside her, clutching a slingshot and wearing a belt far too big for him. "If they come, they won't find us unprepared," she said. Her voice didn't waver, though Levi could see her fingers curled tightly around a nail she hadn't even realized she was holding. Levi looked at the boy, then at Clara. "He should go," he said softly. "You too for now. There's a boarding house down by New Haven Creek. I know the owner. Tell her I sent you." Clara's eyes darkened. "We've run enough. This land, it's all we have." Levi stepped closer. "And I won't let it be taken. But if you stay, they'll use you against me. You, the kids, this ranch, it's what makes me fight. Which means it's what they'll aim to break." Clara turned away, her jaw tight. She knew he was right. But right didn't always feel fair. That evening, they loaded a wagon with supplies. Jonah handed Caleb a leather pouch filled with dried herbs and a smooth river stone. "For courage," he told the boy, ruffling his hair. Clara hugged Levi at the edge of the yard, the sky painted with the purple-gold hues of dusk. "Don't die, Levi Cutter," she whispered into his neck. He held her tighter. "Not planning on it." When the wagon finally rolled away, Levi watched until it disappeared beyond the ridgeline, only then letting the breath leave his lungs. The ranch felt emptier than it should have. Jonah stood at his side. "A man fights better when he's not guarding ghosts." Levi gave a grim smile. "Let's hope you're right." That night, they dug trenches, reinforced the barn walls, and scattered metal shards in the tall grass beyond the main gate. Jonah set tripwires, fashioned from fishing line and broken glass. Levi double-checked every rifle, laid ammunition in neat rows along the porch rail. The Mustang paced restlessly, sensing the storm yet to come. It arrived at dawn 2 days later. Dust curled up from the trail like smoke from a fuse. 10 riders. No markings. Faces wrapped in bandanas, guns at their side. Syndicate men, driven not by law but by fear of losing power. Levi and Jonah waited just behind the porch railing. When the first man shouted a warning, Jonah raised his bow and loosed a single arrow that whistled like a hawk's cry. The lead horse reared, its rider tumbling into the dust. Chaos followed. The next moments blurred into gunshots, shouts, and the deep bellow of horses. Levi fired with brutal precision, each shot a declaration. This land is no longer yours to claim. Jonah moved through the shadows like a ghost, silent and deadly, his arrows always finding flesh. Still, they were outnumbered. A bullet clipped Levi's shoulder, spinning him back against the wall. Blood soaked his sleeve. He gritted his teeth and kept firing. Jonah was hit too, a graze across the ribs, but he didn't flinch. The fight pressed closer. One of the men broke from the group and dashed toward the barn. Levi saw him just as the man passed the paddock, too close. The Mustang reared high, wild and magnificent, and struck the man square in the chest, hooves cracking bone. The man dropped instantly. The others hesitated. It was just enough. Jonah tossed Levi a fresh rifle, and the two of them surged forward, forcing the remaining attackers into retreat. 2 ran. 1 begged. Levi stood over him, chest heaving. "Who sent you?" he demanded. The man coughed, face caked with dust. "No name. Just orders. The ranch, they wanted. Water rights, they said. Something about a rail spur." Levi backed off. The syndicate wasn't just about land anymore. It was about access, control, futures. By noon, it was over. 5 men lay dead. 2 wounded, tied in the root cellar. The rest gone like smoke. Levi stood in the yard, blood drying on his shirt. Jonah stitched his shoulder in the kitchen, hands steady, expression unreadable. "You fight like a man who doesn't expect to live," Jonah said quietly. Levi looked out the window. Maybe I didn't. Until now. That afternoon, he rode out to New Haven Creek. When Clara saw him, dusty and bruised but standing, she burst into tears. Caleb ran to him, arms flung wide, and for a moment Levi forgot the pain, the war, the past. That night, back at the ranch, they sat under the stars. Jonah smoked his pipe. Clara braided Elsie's hair. Levi carved a piece of driftwood into the shape of a horse. For the first time in years, he was building something that didn't have to be buried or burned. Will they come again? Caleb asked, eyes wide. Levi looked to Jonah, who gave a slight nod. They might. But next time we'll have friends. People saw what happened. Word will travel. Clara smiled faintly. And the land. Levi reached into his coat and pulled out a deed, freshly stamped, signed by the county registrar. He handed it to her. It's yours. Fully. Legally. No one can take it now. She stared at it, then at him. You did this. We did this, he said, voice rough. Clara leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. The fire crackled. The Mustang nickered softly in the distance. For the first time, peace didn't feel like something borrowed. It felt like something earned.